Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. My name is Kevin. If you've ever been in one of those relationships where you're constantly wondering what mood your partner will be in today, or if they'll actually respond to your text this time, this story is going to feel familiar. And if you stick around, I'll tell you exactly why agreeing to be just friends was the best decision I never saw coming. So let me take you back to where this all started going wrong. Barbara and I had been dating for about 8 months when I first noticed that when we had what I thought was a normal disagreement, maybe I'd made plans with my friends without checking with her first or some other small thing instead of talking it through like most people do, she'd just give me cold shoulders. We weren't living together, so she'd stop responding to my texts. My calls would go straight to voicemail. Her Instagram stories would show her out with friends, clearly fine, just not talking to me. The first time it happened, I thought maybe she was genuinely hurt and needed space. So I gave her a day, then sent a text apologizing and asking if we could talk. Nothing. Another day passed. I tried calling. Straight to voicemail. By day 3, I was losing my mind. I'd replay our last conversation over and over, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. I know how that sounds. But when someone you care about suddenly treats you like you don't exist, you start questioning everything. On day 4, when she's sure I must have apologized for even things I never did, she'd text back like nothing happened, asking how my day was. No acknowledgement of the silence. No explanation. Just back to normal. And I was so relieved to have her talking to me again that I'd never bring it up. This became our pattern. Every few weeks, something would set her off. And I use that term loosely because half the time I genuinely couldn't figure out what I'd done. She'd go silent for anywhere from 2 to 5 days. I'd spiral, overthinking every interaction we'd had. Then she'd come back, and I'd be so grateful that I'd ignore how messed up the whole thing was. The worst part? I started changing my behavior to avoid triggering these episodes. I'd think twice before making plans with friends. I'd put my phone away the second she walked into a room. I'd agree with her opinions even when I didn't really agree, just to keep the peace. I was walking on eggshells in my own relationship, but back then, I didn't see it like this. The thing about dating someone who lives across town is that when you fight, you can't just hash it out face to face. You're stuck with texts and phone calls until you guys agree to see, and let me tell you, trying to resolve conflict through a screen is like trying to perform surgery with oven mitts. There was this one fight. I remember it clearly because it was so stupid it's almost funny now. We were supposed to meet for lunch on a Saturday. I'd suggested this sandwich place we'd been to before, and she'd said it sounded good. But when I got there, she seemed off. She told me I always picked the same places, barely looking at me while she said it. I was confused and reminded her that she'd said this place was fine. She said that just because she'd said it was fine didn't mean it was what she wanted. See, this is what I mean. How was I supposed to know that her agreeing to the place actually meant she hated the idea, but wasn't going to tell me? The lunch was tense. Every attempt I made at conversation felt forced. When I asked if she wanted to do something afterward, she said she had plans with her roommate. When I offered to drop her off, she said she'd take an Uber. That was Friday afternoon. By Friday night, she wasn't responding to my texts. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, nothing. I sent probably 6 texts over those 3 days, asking if we could talk about what happened, and saying I felt like there was a misunderstanding. Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed. She apologized for being busy with work and asked if I wanted to grab dinner that week. No mention of the fight. No acknowledgement that she'd ignored me for 4 days. Just an invitation to dinner, like I was supposed to forget the whole thing happened. And here's the thing, I did forget it. Because I was so tired of the drama, so tired of feeling like I was constantly in trouble for things I didn't understand, I'd take any version of her that was willing to be civil to me. By the time we hit the 2-year mark of our relationship, I was exhausted. It felt like I had been holding my breath for months. I'd started to dread seeing her name pop up on my phone because I never knew if it was going to be something sweet or something that would start another cycle of silent treatment. I'd catch myself rehearsing conversations in my head, trying to find the exact right words that wouldn't set her off. My friends started to notice that I seemed so stressed most of the time I am with them. I didn't know how to explain that I was in a relationship where I felt like I was constantly failing tests I didn't know I was taking. The last big fight was over something completely ridiculous. We were texting about weekend plans, and I mentioned that I might go to my cousin's birthday party on Saturday night. She responded with just okay. Just okay. Nothing else. I knew that okay wasn't really okay. So I called her. I told her she seemed upset about the party. She said she wasn't upset. I said she seemed like she was, and she asked why I was trying to make her upset. See what happened there? Somehow, I'd gone from asking if she was okay to being accused of trying to make her upset. This was how these conversations always went. I said I wasn't trying to make her upset, just wanted to make sure we were good. She said we were fine. But we weren't fine. Her voice had that edge to it that I'd learned to recognize. The tone that meant I was already in trouble. I just didn't know for what yet. I asked if she wanted to come to the party with me, thinking maybe that was the issue. She said she wasn't invited. I told her she didn't need an invitation, that it was just family, but she cut me off and told me to just go to my party. And she hung up. That was Wednesday. By Thursday, the silent treatment had started. Friday came and went. By Saturday, the day of the party, I was so stressed about whether to go or not that I almost just stayed home. I went to the party, but I spent the whole time checking my phone and making excuses for why Barbara wasn't there. My family kept asking where she was, and I didn't know what to say. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, still nothing. At this point, I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just tired. Wednesday evening, she texted asking if she could come over after work the next day because we needed to talk. My stomach dropped. In 2 years of dating, we need to talk had never led anywhere good. But at least she was talking to me again. Thursday dragged by. I kept checking the time, trying to guess when she'd get off work and make the 20-minute drive to my place. She knocked at 6:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I'd been watching the clock. She looked tired when I opened the door. I said hey, and she said hey back, not quite meeting my eyes. I told her to come in. She sat on the edge of my couch, still in her work clothes, purse clutched in her lap, like she might need to leave quickly. I sat across from her in the chair by the window and asked what was up. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. She finally said she'd been thinking about us, about how things had been going. I waited. She said she thought we should just be friends. You know what's weird? The first emotion I felt wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger or confusion or heartbreak. It was relief. I told her okay. She looked up at me, surprised. I think she was expecting me to fight her on it, to ask why, or beg her to reconsider. She repeated okay, like a question. I said yeah, okay. After walking on eggshells, trying to decode mixed signals and navigate silent treatments for a long time, feeling like I was constantly disappointing someone I loved, it was over. She asked if I wasn't upset. I thought about it for a second. Was I upset? I mean, yeah, part of me was sad. We'd had good times together. There were things about her I'd miss. But honestly, the overwhelming feeling was relief. I told her I was tired. Tired of feeling like I was always doing something wrong. Tired of not knowing if she was going to talk to me or ignore me for a week. I was just tired. She nodded slowly and said she thought we just wanted different things. I agreed that she was right. She stayed for maybe 10 more minutes. We talked about practical stuff. She had a couple of hoodies at my place. I had some books at hers. Normal breakup logistics. After she left, I sat in my apartment and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The first few weeks were weird. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to text her about something funny I'd seen, or I'd see a movie trailer and think about asking if she wanted to go. But mostly, I felt lighter. I started hanging out with friends again, without worrying about whether Barbara would be upset that I hadn't invited her, or that I was staying out too late. I could just exist without constantly calculating how my actions might be interpreted. About a month after the breakup, I ran into Amanda at a coffee shop downtown. Amanda was Barbara's friend from college. They'd been roommates junior year and stayed close. I'd met her a bunch of times when Barbara and I were together, and she'd always been cool. Easy to talk to, funny, never seemed to have any drama going on. She said hey, and asked how I'd been as she got in line behind me. I said good and realized I actually meant it. I asked how she was doing. She said she couldn't complain, that work was busy, but that was nothing new. We ended up sitting together, just catching up. She asked how I was doing post-breakup, and I was honest, said it had been for the best, that Barbara and I just weren't compatible. Amanda nodded like she understood. She said that sometimes people just bring out the worst in each other, that it doesn't mean either person is bad, just that the chemistry is wrong. I appreciated that she didn't trash talk Barbara or take sides. Just acknowledged that relationships are complicated. We talked for about an hour. She was working as a graphic designer for a marketing firm, thinking about going freelance. I told her about a project I was working on at my job. When we were both getting ready to leave, she said we should grab coffee again sometime. I said I'd like that. Amanda and I started hanging out maybe once a week. Sometimes coffee, sometimes lunch. Occasionally, we check out a new restaurant or go to a movie. It was refreshing to spend time with someone who said what they meant and meant what they said. If Amanda suggested a restaurant and I countered with a different idea, she'd either say she really had her heart set on the first place or that my suggestion sounded even better. There were no games, no hidden meanings, or week-long silent treatments because I'd suggested Italian instead of Mexican. She was also just fun to be around. She'd make these perfectly timed observations about people or situations that would have me cracking up. Was I attracted to her? Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. Amanda was objectively beautiful, tall with dark hair, and these green eyes that were really striking. But I wasn't looking to jump into anything serious, and she seemed to be on the same page. We were just two people who enjoyed each other's company when we spent time together. I should mention here that Barbara and Amanda were still friends at this point. Not best friends, but they'd text occasionally, see each other at group things. I wasn't trying to hide the fact that Amanda and I were hanging out, but I also wasn't advertising it. If someone had asked, I would have been honest about it. About 3 months into this friendship with Amanda, we were at a farmer's market on a Saturday morning when I saw someone who looked familiar. I turned to get a better look and realized it was Barbara's coworker, Jen. We'd met a few times when I'd picked Barbara up from work events. Jen saw me too and waved. I waved back, and that was it. Just a friendly acknowledgement between two people who sort of knew each other. I didn't think much of it at the time. The next evening, my phone rang, and it was Barbara's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. We'd been broken up for months, and we'd barely spoken since that evening in my apartment. But curiosity got the better of me. I answered, and she asked how I was. Her voice sounded different. I said I was good and asked what was up. She said she'd heard I was at the farmer's market yesterday. Straight to the point. I confirmed I was and mentioned I was with Amanda because I sensed where this conversation was going. Silence. She repeated Amanda's name. I said yeah. She asked if it was like a date. I could have corrected her. Could have explained that Amanda and I were just friends, that we weren't dating, that it wasn't what she was thinking. But honestly, it wasn't really any of her business anymore. I told her we were just hanging out. She said right and paused before saying she didn't know we were hanging out. I said it had been a few weeks now. She repeated a few weeks and was quiet for a moment before asking if we could talk, maybe grab dinner that week. And there it was. After months of silence, she'd been the one to end things. And now she wanted to talk. I told her I didn't think that was a good idea. She asked why not, reminding me that we'd said we'd be friends. I said we were friends, but that didn't mean we needed to have dinner and hash out our feelings. She asked if I was just going to date her friend instead. This was the moment I realized that Barbara hadn't changed at all. After all these months apart, she was still trying to control the narrative, still trying to make me feel guilty for living my life. I told her calmly that I wasn't dating her friend, but even if I was, we were broken up. Her choice, I reminded her. She said she knew, but then trailed off. I asked, but what? Pointing out that she'd ended things and didn't get to be upset about what I did afterward. She was quiet for a long moment. She said she just thought it was weird that I'd go after Amanda. I explained that I didn't go after anyone, that we'd run into each other, and started hanging out. It was really that simple. She said right, then told me she hoped I was happy. And she hung up. I stared at my phone for a minute, waiting to feel something. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But all I felt was that same relief I'd felt the night she'd asked to be friends. Confirmation that I'd made the right choice in letting her go. Over the next couple of weeks, Barbara launched what I can only describe as a subtle campaign to sabotage my friendship with Amanda. It started with Amanda mentioning that Barbara had called her out of the blue. Amanda told me Barbara had wanted to grab lunch, which was weird because they hadn't hung out one-on-one in a while. I asked what they talked about. Amanda stirred her latte thoughtfully and said mostly her, actually. Barbara had kept asking about work, about dating, about what she'd been up to lately. Then she'd started asking about me. I asked what kind of questions. Amanda said Barbara had asked whether we were dating, how often we hung out, and whether I'd mentioned her. Amanda told me she'd said we were friends, and that I seemed to be doing well. Barbara hadn't seemed happy about that. A few days later, Amanda mentioned another conversation. Amanda said Barbara had texted her about some party the following weekend, but then spent most of the conversation telling her how we'd broken up. I asked what she'd said. Amanda said Barbara had told her I'd been controlling, that I didn't like her having male friends, that I'd get jealous whenever she talked to other guys. I want to be clear here, none of that was true. Barbara had plenty of male friends, and I'd never had an issue with any of them. If anything, I'd been the one trying to make more friends, and she'd been the one who'd get weird about me hanging out with people. Amanda continued, saying Barbara had also claimed I'd been trying to get back together, that I'd been calling and texting her constantly. I pulled out my phone and showed Amanda my message history with Barbara. The last text I'd sent was 3 months ago, right after our breakup, confirming when I could drop off her stuff. Amanda looked at the screen, then at me, and said she'd figured that wasn't true. I asked why. She said because she knew me, that I wasn't the type to blow up someone's phone or be controlling. And honestly, the way Barbara had been talking about it felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced what she was going to say. This went on for about 2 weeks. Barbara would find excuses to text Amanda, and every conversation would somehow circle back to me and how terrible I was as a boyfriend. How I was probably just using Amanda to make her jealous. How Amanda should be careful because I was on the rebound and not really interested in genuine friendship. Amanda started screenshotting some of these conversations and showing them to me. Not because she wanted to stir up drama, but because they were getting so ridiculous that they were almost funny. Amanda told me Barbara had said the day before that I'd only started hanging out with her to get back at Barbara, because apparently I was that type of guy. I read through the messages. Barbara had written paragraph after paragraph about my supposed motivations, my character flaws, my history of being vindictive and manipulative. I told Amanda that what was crazy was that 8 months ago, I would have been devastated that Barbara was saying this stuff about me. I would have called her crying, begging her to stop, trying to prove that I wasn't those things. Amanda asked what about now. I said now I was just grateful that Barbara was showing her exactly who she was. Amanda smiled and said Barbara wasn't really selling herself very well. It should have ended there. Barbara had made her play. It hadn't worked, and that should have been that. But life has a way of making things messier than you expect. I would later find out something about a month later about my ex, Barbara. I was at my friend's birthday party when I ran into some mutual friends of Barbara and me. We were never that close, but we'd always gotten along fine. The first thing one of them asked me was where Barbara was. When I mentioned we weren't together anymore, they acted like they were just finding out. We had a few conversations. Then I went to join a different set of guys at the party. The party moved on just fine. It was the next day that I got a call from a number I had never really saved. He introduced himself as one of the mutual friends I had met the previous day. We got talking. He asked if I felt bad about losing Barbara, and I said I wasn't happy that I spent 2 years of my life for nothing. He encouraged me to be happy because even while we were together, Barbara was never faithful to me. The friend would go on to tell me how Barbara was in another relationship and ended mine when she felt the other one was getting serious. He added that things didn't work out for her and the other guy months after our relationship ended. I was speechless with this revelation. The friend said I should be happy that it ended because Barbara was not worth the effort I had put in to make her happy. I thanked him for sharing this with me, and we ended the conversation. This was something I'd suspected but never wanted to admit. Barbara hadn't asked to be friends because she thought we were incompatible. She'd asked to be friends because she had someone else lined up and wanted to keep me as a backup plan. I was not happy, exactly, but not devastated either. Just clear. I began asking more people who had access to Barbara questions about her life lately, and a lot of things started making sense. Barbara's anger about my hanging out with Amanda wasn't about jealousy or hurt feelings. It was about control. She'd ended our relationship, expecting me to sit around waiting for her to decide if she wanted me back. When her thing with her other relationship didn't work out, and she saw that I was moving on, she panicked. The phone call asking me to dinner? That was her trying to reel me back in. The campaign against me with Amanda? That was her trying to sabotage any connection I might make, so I'd be available for her to come back. All of it made perfect sense once I understood her actual motivation. Here's what I think happened. Barbara had been invested in her other relationship for a while, but she didn't want to risk losing me until she knew for sure that things would work out with him. So she asked to be friends, which really meant stay available while I see if I can do better. When the other relationship didn't work out, she tried to come back. When I didn't take the bait, she tried to eliminate any other options I might have developed. It was calculating and manipulative, but it was also very human. People do messy, selfish things when they're scared of being alone. When I told Amanda what I'd learned, her reaction was exactly what I'd come to expect from her. Direct and honest. She said that made so much sense that she'd been wondering why Barbara was so invested in convincing her I was terrible. Like, if we were really just friends and she was happy, why would she care who I was hanging out with? I asked what she thought about all of it. Amanda was quiet for a moment, then said she thought Barbara probably wasn't a bad person, but she was definitely not ready to be in a healthy relationship with anyone. And she thought I'd dodged a bullet. I asked if she had any regrets about getting caught in the middle of all this drama. She asked if I was kidding, saying this had been way more entertaining than anything on Netflix. That was Amanda. She could find humor in almost any situation without being mean about it. She continued, saying Barbara had kind of done us a favor. I asked how so. She said all Barbara's attempts to convince her I was terrible had just made it more obvious that I wasn't. I mean, if the worst things she could come up with were lies, that was actually a pretty good character reference. Looking back on the whole situation, I learned some things about relationships that I wish I'd understood earlier. First, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Barbara showed me who she was during our first fight, when she disappeared for 4 days instead of having a conversation. I chose to believe her explanations and excuses instead of trusting what I'd observed with my own eyes. Second, healthy relationships don't require you to constantly manage another person's emotions. With Barbara, I was always calculating how my actions might affect her mood, what might set her off, how I could prevent the next silent treatment. With Amanda, I could just be myself and trust that if something bothered her, she'd tell me directly. Third, sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is leave your life. I spent 2 years trying to make things work with Barbara, and I was miserable. She ended things, and within a few months, I was happier than I'd been in ages. Fourth, people who try to control your other relationships are showing you something important about themselves. Barbara's attempts to sabotage my friendship with Amanda weren't about protecting me or Amanda. They were about maintaining control over my options. And finally, I learned that agreeing to be just friends with someone can be the smartest thing you ever do, even when it's for reasons you don't understand at the time. So where are things now? Barbara and I don't talk. We're not enemies, but we're not friends either. We're just two people who used to date and have moved on with our lives. Amanda and I are still friends. We hang out, we text, we grab coffee when we're both free. Nothing romantic has happened between us yet, but if it does, that's okay. I do not wish to jump into another relationship almost immediately. The thing about toxic relationships is that they're like being in a room with no windows. You don't realize how much you need fresh air until you finally step outside. Being with Barbara felt normal because it was all I knew. But spending time with Amanda, having conversations without hidden meanings, making plans without drama, just existing without constantly bracing for the next emotional landmine, showed me what I'd been missing. I'm not saying Amanda is perfect or that our friendship is some kind of fairy tale. Real life doesn't work that way. But it is honest and straightforward and peaceful, and after a relationship of chaos, that feels revolutionary. If you're in a relationship where you're constantly walking on eggshells, where you never know what version of your partner you're going to get, where simple conversations feel like navigating a minefield, pay attention to that feeling. It's your instincts telling you something important. Don't ignore red flags because you love someone. Don't stay in situations that make you smaller because you're hoping the other person will change. And definitely don't let anyone convince you that drama equals passion or that fighting means you care. Barbara probably thought she was being strategic when she asked to be friends while exploring other options. But really, she was just setting me free to find out what a healthy connection actually feels like. If you've been in a similar situation, drop a comment and let me know how it worked out for you. And if you're currently in one of these toxic cycles, maybe it's time to ask yourself what you're really holding on to and whether it's worth it. Hit like if this story resonated with you, subscribe for more. Thank you for watching.